Good day, and welcome to the very first installment of Mr. Bloom's Storytime. I hope everyone is enjoying their unscheduled vacation and studying and getting everything done, spending time with their family. Today we are going to be starting my favorite book. It also happens to be the favorite book of Will Smith and a lot of famous actors and people you may know. The Alchemist. It is written by my favorite author, Paulo Coelho. And I'm just going to dive right into the book so we can get started. Remember, if you're in my ninth grade English language arts class, the book is posted in PDF format on Google Classroom, as well as I have provided physical copies that you can pick up at the homework packet pickup on Mondays during the outage while we were out of class. So for those of you not in my English class, I have printed copies of it, paper. Don't worry, Paulo Coelho has actually celebrated and he is requesting people share his work via distribution, and so I do not feel that bad about it. So if you would like a copy, let me know. I can bind these, and you could have your own copy, although in paper format that you can read to your own children. It's a great book. It's a timeless story about fulfilling one's destiny. So, with that being said, I'm going to dive right into the book. We will be reading about 10 minutes worth every segment. You can find the guiding questions on your Google Classroom account. Those of you not in my class, you can, if you request a copy of the guiding questions, if you'd like to have them for your own homeschool purposes, feel free to reach out to me via Facebook or Messenger, Facebook Messenger or email. Gregory Allen Bloom, that's GregoryAlanBloom, M as in Mary, at gmail.com, and I will be more than happy to provide you with guiding questions as well as the worksheet resources that accompany the text. That being said, I'm going to dive right into the book, and I hope you enjoy. I'm going to read the back and give you an idea on the theme of the book, which is fulfilling one's destiny. And the text on the back says, "To realize one's destiny is a person's only obligation." So, let's dive right in. The boy's name was Santiago. Dusk was falling as the boy arrived with his herd at an abandoned church. The roof had fallen in long ago, and an enormous sycamore had grown on the spot where the sacristy had once stood. He decided to spend the night there. He saw to it that all the sheep entered through the ruined gate, and then laid some planks across it to prevent the flock from wandering away during the night. There were no wolves in the region, but once an animal had strayed during the night, and the boy had to spend the entire next day searching for it. He swept the floor with his jacket and lay down, using the book he had just finished reading as a pillow. He told himself that he would have to start reading thicker books. They lasted longer, and made more comfortable pillows. It was still dark when he awoke, and looking up, he could see the stars through the half-destroyed roof. I wanted to sleep a little longer, he thought. He had the same dream that night as a week ago, and once again he had awakened before it ended. He arose, and, taking up his crook, began to awaken the sheep that still slept. He had noticed that, as soon as he awoke, most of the animals also began to stir. It was as if some mysterious energy bound his life to that of the sheep, with whom he had spent the past 2 years, leading them through the countryside in search of food and water. "They are so used to me that they know my schedule," he muttered. Thinking about that for a moment, he realized that it could be the other way around, that it was he who had been accustomed to their schedule. But there were certain of them who took a bit longer to awaken. The boy prodded them, one by one, with his crook, calling each by name. He had always believed that the sheep were able to understand what he said. So there were times when he read them parts of his books that had made an impression on him. And when he would tell them of the loneliness or the happiness of a shepherd in the fields, sometimes he would comment to them on the things he had seen in the villages they passed. But for the past few days he had spoken to them about only one thing, The girl. The daughter of a merchant who lived in the village they would reach in about 4 days. He had been to the village only once, the year before. The merchant was the proprietor of a dry goods shop, and he had always demanded that the sheep be sheared in his presence so that he would not be cheated. A friend had told the boy about the shop, and he had taken his sheep there. "I need to sell some wool," the boy told the merchant. The shop was busy, and the man asked the shepherd to wait until the afternoon. So the boy sat on the steps of the shop and took a book from his bag. "I didn't know shepherds knew how to read," said a girl's voice behind him. The girl was typical of the region of Andalusia, with flowing black hair and eyes that vaguely recalled the Moorish conquerors. "Well, usually I learn from my sheep more from my sheep than from the books," he answered. During the 2 hours that they talked, she told him she was the merchant's daughter, and spoke of life in the village, where each day was like all the others. The shepherd told her of the Andalusian countryside, and related the news from the other towns where he had stopped. It was a pleasant change from the talking to the sheep. "How did you learn to read?" the girl asked at one point. "Like everybody learns," he said, "in school." "Well, if you know how to read, why are you just a shepherd?" The boy mumbled an answer that allowed him to avoid responding to the question. He was sure the girl would never understand. He went on telling stories about his travels, and her bright, Moorish eyes went wide with fear and surprise. As the time passed, the boy found himself wishing that the day would never end, that her father would stay busy and keep him waiting for 3 days. He recognized that he was feeling something he had never experienced before, the desire to live in one place forever. With the girl with the raven hair, his days would never be the same again. But finally the merchant appeared and asked the boy to shear 4 sheep. He paid for the wool and asked the shepherd to come back the following year. And now it was only 4 days before he would be back in that same village. He was excited and at the same time uneasy. Maybe the girl had already forgotten him. Lots of shepherds passed through selling their wool. "It doesn't matter," he said to the sheep. "I know other girls in other places." But in his heart he knew that it did matter, and he knew that shepherds, like seamen and like traveling salesmen, always found a town where there was someone who could make them forget the joys of carefree wandering. The day was dawning, and the shepherd urged his sheep in the direction of the sun. They never had to make any decisions, he thought. Maybe that's why they always stay close to me. The only things that concerned the sheep were food and water. As long as the boy knew how to find the best pastures in Andalusia, they would be his friends. Yes, their days were all the same, with seemingly endless hours between sunrise and dusk, and they had never read a book in their young lives, and didn't understand when the boy told them about the sights of the cities. They were content with just food and water, and, in exchange, they generously gave of their wool, their company, and, once in a while, their meat. "If I became a monster today and decided to kill them one by one, they would only become aware only after most of their flock had been slaughtered," thought the boy. "They trust me, and they've forgotten how to rely on their own instincts, because I lead them to nourishment." The boy was surprised at his thoughts. Maybe the church, with the sycamore growing from within, had been haunted. It had caused him to have the same dream for a second time, and it was causing him to feel anger towards his faithful companions. He drank a bit from the wine that remained from his dinner of the night before, and gathered his jacket closer to the body. He knew that a few hours from now, with the sun at its zenith, the heat would be so great that he would not be able to lead his flock across the fields. It was the time of day when all of Spain slept during the summer. The heat lasted until nightfall, and all the time he had to carry his jacket. But when he thought to complain about the burden of its weight, he remembered that, because he had the jacket, he had withstood the cold of the dawn. "We have to be prepared for change," he thought, and he was grateful for the jacket's weight and warmth. The jacket had a purpose, and so did the boy. His purpose in life was to travel, and after 2 years of walking the Andalusian terrain, he knew all of the cities of the region. He was planning on this visit to explain to the girl how it was that a simple shepherd knew how to read. That he had attended a seminary, that is, a church for priests, until he was 16. His parents had wanted him to become a priest, and thereby a source of pride for a simple farm family. They worked hard just to have food and water like the sheep. He had studied Latin, Spanish, and theology. But ever since he had been a child, he had wanted to know the world, and this was much more important to him than knowing God and learning about man's sins. One afternoon, on a visit to his family, he had summoned up the courage to tell his father that he didn't want to become a priest, that he wanted to travel. "People from all over the world have passed through this village, son," said the father. "They come in search of new things, but when they leave, they are basically the same people they were when they arrived. They climb the mountains to see the castle, and they wind up thinking about the past was better than what we have now. They have blonde hair or dark skin, but basically they're the same people who live right here." "But I'd like to see the castles in the town where they live," the boy explained. "Those people, when they see our land, say that they would like to live here forever," his father continued. "Well, I'd like to see their land and see how they live," said the son. "The people who come here have a lot of money to spend so they can afford to travel," his father said. "Amongst us, the only ones who travel are the shepherds." "Well, then I'll be a shepherd." His father said no more. The next day, he gave his son a pouch that held 3 ancient Spanish coins. "I found these one day in the fields. I wanted them to be part of your inheritance, but use them to buy your flock. Take to the fields, and someday you'll learn that our countryside is the best, and our women are the most beautiful." And he gave the boy his blessing. The boy could see in his father's gaze a desire to be able, himself, to travel the world. A desire that was still alive despite his father having had buried it, over dozens of years, under the burden of struggling for water to drink, food to eat, and the same place to sleep every night. The horizon was tinged with red, and suddenly the sun appeared. The boy thought back to that conversation with his father, and felt happy. He had already seen many castles and met many women, but none the equal of the one who had waited him several days since. He owned a jacket, a book he could trade for another, and a flock of sheep. But, most important, he was able every day to live out his dream. If he were to tire of the Andalusian fields, he could sell his sheep and go to sea. By the time he had enough of the sea, he could already have known other cities, other women, and other chances to be happy. "I couldn't have found God in the seminary," he thought, as he looked at the sunrise. Whenever he could, he sought out a new road to travel. He had never been to that ruined church before, in spite of having traveled through parts many times. The world was huge and inexhaustible. He had only to allow his sheep to set the route for a while, and he would discover other interesting things. The problem is that they don't even realize that they're walking a new road every day. They don't see that the fields are new and the seasons change. All they think about is food and water. "Maybe we're all that way," the boy mused. "Even me. I haven't thought of other women since I met the merchant's daughter." Looking at the sun, he calculated that he would reach Tarifa by midday. There he could exchange his book for a thicker one, fill his wine bottle, shave, and have a haircut. He had to prepare himself for his meeting with the girl, and he didn't want to think about the possibility that some other shepherd, with a larger flock of sheep, had arrived there before him and asked for her hand. It's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting, he thought. As he looked again at the position of the sun, and hurried his pace. He had also suddenly remembered that in Tarifa there was an old woman who interpreted dreams. And we will end there. Be sure to tune in next time. We will be continuing with the book. I just wanted to give a brief introduction and hope you enjoyed listening.